Laurie Huston's News for the Heart is dedicated to helping you give a voice to your own soul. Our hearts have the power to free us from pain and the struggles that keep us from awakening to our true essence. Join Laurie now as we delve into our heart and soul to find the path that will open us to the possibilities and lead us to the life we love to live.
And good afternoon. This is News for the Heart. I cannot believe it is the last day of January. When did that happen? We're already 1 month past the new year. It seems to have been going really, really quickly. So as we usually do, February is considered Love Month. And I thought we'd talk about, we talk a lot about love versus fears. We definitely talk a lot about fears. The question is, what is love? To me, when I think about love, it's having my heart fully open, which you can only do if you feel safe and there's no fear. So to me, that's love. Now, that can be romantic. It can be with friends. It's all inclusive. It's just, I guess if we don't feel safe, we can't keep our heart open. And if we don't have our heart open, then it's not love. It's something else. It's need or want So I thought we'd chat about that beginning and see where it goes, because I'm sure it will manifest in many different ways. And since we've done this many times, I thought this is an interesting twist on what we usually do to talk about what really is love. All right, Tom.
Okay.
Oh, wait. Did I introduce you? My wonderful co-host that comes the last Tuesday of every month, Tom Campbell. Everybody knows anyway. But welcome to the show, Tom.
Oh, thank you, Laurie. Thank you very much. Well, love is a word we use a lot.
It is.
Right? You see something that you appreciate and you say, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Or you go make love, or love is a word that seems to have lots and lots of meanings, but none of them are really too specific.
Right.
Sometimes it's a synonym for like.
Yes.
Sometimes it's a synonym for sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
It's in our culture, we just have that one word. The Greeks had several kinds of love, right? Where they could differentiate between, agape and other loves, the kind of love that develops in friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And eros, and what else? There's a couple more. Anyway, they had several words, and evidently other cultures also have multiple words for love, where they see that love is not just this one thing. It's a lot more things. So they have different words for different aspects. Not so in English. We just have love, and you have to understand what the speaker is saying based on content. You look at the content, and if you got the content, then you can figure out what it is they're trying to say. Right. But it's still confusing when you talk about love as to exactly what it is we're talking about. So let's kind of work on the definition a little bit here. All right. Now, when most people say that they're falling in love or they're in a love relationship, most of the time for most people, that means really that they're falling in need. They've found someone who meets their needs, and hopefully that they meet the other person's needs as well. And then that means they tend to pair off, meet each other's needs. But that's not love. That's needs. And we talk about unconditional love like it's a special kind of love. Oh, this is unconditional love. But I would say that unconditional love is the only kind of love there is. If it's not unconditional, it's not love. So if it say, well, I love you as long as you do this, this, and that, or as long as, or if, then that's an arrangement. That's a deal. That's something you negotiate. It's not love. Love isn't negotiated. Love is always unconditional. Now, love is always given away for free.
Yeah.
No conditions. That's what I mean for free. There's no conditions to it. It's just given away. You care enough to want to be helpful, to want to take care of, this other person or this dog or cat. You can love your cat, love your dog. It's an in-depth, a deeper emotional. It's not just intellectual. It's past the intellect. It's at the deep level where you just care enough for something that you're willing to give to it without getting anything back. Just give because you want to, because you care that much. So that's love. So not as love always just freely given, but love also, you don't take it back.
Right.
When you love someone, even if it turns out you don't like that someone, the love is still there. You still care about them, even if you don't want to be around them anymore. So love is something that is permanent in that sense. It's not easily let go of. Now it does it does seem to come and go with time, but it's not really the love that comes and goes with time. It's just your connection to it, your interactions with it. If you love someone and that person disappears from your life, maybe they die, maybe they move on, move to another part of the world or something, you still love them, but your interaction, your relationship now is at a distance. So that's different, but the love is still there and you still care about them, even if you never see them again.
Absolutely.
They're still there and you still care about them and you still hope that they're doing well.
Mm-hmm.
You have positive feelings about that person or that animal or whatever it is. Now, what about what about loving inanimate things? Oh, I love my house. I love my car. That's probably just using love instead of the word like.
Yeah.
You're really talking about like there, not love. That's just us with our language. We say love for lots of things when we're really talking about something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we don't say, I fell in need. We say, I fell in love. And so we say those sorts of things, but that has more to do with like. I like my house. I like my car. But, we do love our pets. We get very emotionally attached to them and they're part of our family and we care about them and we mourn them when they die. And, that's love. So it's not just human to human.
No.
It can be other things. Now, you can
In fact,
love.
it's easier to love a pet because they almost never talk back. Almost. Sorry.
Yeah.
And
Almost.
I know you just missed one of your pets. So my condolences for you and Pamela.
Yeah, we just had one, a dog that was 16 years old, which is very old for a dog.
Yes.
Finally came to his end. Yeah, it was just last week. So let's see, where was I going with the love thing?
Pets
So
and
love, yeah. So love is it's a feeling.
right.
It's an attitude. It's that you appreciate and care for something without any requirements. that thing you care for doesn't have to necessarily even be nice to you. And we have a lot of that in families. Where families have love for each other because, that's my sister or my brother or my mother or father. And we have love for them, but we really don't like them. We want to get out of the house and get away from them, and we don't want to visit for very long. Short visits are nice, but long visits, create trouble. So that can be a love where the person you love you really don't like very much and don't want to be around them, but you love them still. You still care about them, and you still wish them well. You still feel positive. So it's positive feelings of caring, that you would do things for them. If you saw they had a problem or something you could solve or needed something that you had, then you'd want to give it to them. You'd want to do that. Even if you don't like them, you'd still want to do that. You see, it's love. So love is the opposite of fear. Love is not the opposite of hate. Hate is something you get if you have a lot of fear. But fear is more fundamental than hate. Love is the opposite of fear. And everybody has differing capacities for love. So the amount that you can love is dependent upon how much fear you have. So if you tend to be very full of fear, then your capacity to love is smaller. If you only have just little bits of fear, then you have a much higher capacity to love. So everybody doesn't have the same capacity to love. So a person who is very fearful, say very negative, very self-centered, only has a very small capacity for love. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't love. They do love. And they love right up to, their entire capacity. And that may be all the love that you can get out of that person because that's all that they can do, you see? And that's limiting. So in order for them to be able to love more, they have to get rid of that fear. So every one of us has a kind of a limited capacity to love. You just can't love beyond so much. And it's probably obvious to most people that the more self-centered you are, the less capacity you have to love. But the more self-centered you are, the more fear you have. Fear is always about self. Self-centeredness is mostly rooted in fear that the I doesn't get what it needs, that the I isn't, doesn't have what it wants, that the I is displeased with life, that the I, doesn't like this or that or other things or these people. And it's all about, it's mostly negative, and all of that's fearful. The I fears that it isn't going to get what it wants and what it needs. And because of that, it has strategies to deal with that. And the obvious strategy is it builds a wall. If you're afraid that you're not going to get what you need and that the world is going to not be kind to you, well, you build a wall. And now you play the strategy of I can't lose if I don't play. So now you just, you don't get involved. You get frightened if a relationship starts to get deep. It frightens you because you're afraid that it will go bad. And because you are afraid, then you don't let that relationship ever develop. Because your fear, as that relationship develops, your fear will start sabotaging it. You'll start doing things that stop that relationship from going any deeper because that's too frightening for you, because you just know in your fearful little heart that it's not going to work out. It's going to go bad. It's going to hurt you. And you don't want that. Therefore, I can't get hurt if I don't play the game. So there's a lot of people who stiff arm love. No, love, stay away from me. Go away, because they're fearful. And these people have just a small capacity for love. So it's easier to see a person's self-centeredness. You can look at people, and generally, if you're around them for, even 15, 20 minutes or half hour, you can tell people who are more self-centered from people who are less self-centered, because for the more self-centered people, everything's about them. Everything is about them. For the people who are less self-centered, very little is about them. And it's not that hard to be aware of that. And so you have to understand that love isn't just something everybody can do. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say it that way. Everybody can do it, but they can do it to more or less capacity. They can just do it a little bit, or just shallowly, not so deep. And there's no way to broaden and deepen your capacity to love except by getting rid of your fear. So all of these talks that we have about getting rid of fear, you see, this one is really the most foundational of them, this talk, because that's the basis right there, is fear and love. And if you do love and care about others, and not just other people, but just, things, you care about the environment. You can care about the clean air, or the fact that polar bears are having a hard time these days, or, those sorts of things. You can just love people, not necessarily individual people. You can love just humanity, or your culture, or even your country. You can love things as well as individual people. And again, it's a caring to the point that you want to give. You want, you look and you see, how can I help? How can I give? What can I do that will be useful or helpful to what I love? And then, of course, you have to be aware enough to know when that giving is being helpful and when that giving is contributing to the problem, is not helpful. You're an enabler of bad behavior rather than just giving to somebody who has wants or needs. So, love, because we have just one word for it, is a pretty complicated thing, because it can mean so many different things.
Right.
But when you love someone or a thing, then you don't ask, what's in it for me? Right. You don't ask, am I getting my fair share? You don't ask, is this going to, am I going to suffer if I give? None of that matters. You just give because you want to. It's not intellectual. It's just very deep feeling and knowing that you really appreciate that thing, that person, that animal, those whales, whatever it is. You really appreciate that, and you're willing to give to it. You're willing to give, maybe, dig into your wallet and send them some money. You're willing to go, help if physical help is needed. Like, you're willing to go, if you just love people, you just care about people. There's lots of things you can do to express that. Or you can go work in the soup kitchen someplace. You can go hold preemie babies. You can do all sorts of things. And you just have a warm place in your heart for humanity in general. Just care about people. So it can be broad like that. It's not just small. But that broad love usually only comes with a larger capacity to love. As the capacity is smaller, it's usually just fixed on something, your cat maybe, or another person. And most of us, what we call our love is a mixture of our needs, our self-centeredness, and our love. So it's not like these are separate things that never mix. It's all mixed up there together. So for most people, most of the time, your relationships with the people you love are a combination of your ego, your fear, your self-centeredness, and your love.
Yeah.
And it's all mixed in there together. So that's because you have capacity for fear and a capacity for love, and you express both. You express the fear in many ways, but self-centeredness is just one of the ways you express your fear.
And I think
So
when you mentioned the part about, loving causes and stuff, if you have a great capacity to love, then the causes bring you love and you want to give. But when you don't have a lot of capacity to love, instead you see those causes as something you have to fix, and you get angry and you get, that justified feeling. And so then everything, and unfortunately it becomes so much more negative and fearful and hate provoking than it does loving. And it's interesting because that's something I see a lot.
People tend to get self-righteous.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, those awful people out there doing these awful things,
terrible things,
and then you get angry at them and upset. You want to, you want to fix it, but you really want to fix it with force.
Yeah,
you want to make them stop. What can we do to force them to stop? And just the fact that you're thinking in terms of force lets you know that there's there's a lot of fear going in there,
And
so yes, indeed, that's very true. People who and then they say, I hate that, and I hate those people, and I hate all this greed,
right?
Well, look at all this greed, and I just hate that. Well, hate is not a useful emotion. Hate is not helpful. Hate is very negative. And if you are upset by all the greed and unpleasantness in the world, then if you get angry about it and you get upset about it, you are contributing to the problem. You become part of the problem. Because all the people who are shaking their fist and screaming and full of hate, that's also the problem. That's negative. So it's both. It's the people who are perhaps being very greedy that upset you, and all the people that get upset about it create this dysfunctional dance, between those sets of people. And that dance just goes on and on and on, and there's no end to that. So the idea is that you see things that you don't like a lot of greed in your culture, then you have to be positive. You have to react to it positively. Now, what does that mean? That doesn't mean that you have to like it. No. It just means that you have to not be negative. Don't spend your time being self-righteous. Oh, I'm better than that. Look at all those people doing that. They're awful people, but I'm better. You see, that's just the ego, right? That's ego. That's self-righteous. That doesn't help. You have to say, well, all the dysfunctional things going on, you have to understand that those people are just doing what they do because that's who they are. They're being greedy because they are just greedy. They have a low quality of consciousness, and they can't do much better than that. But they're learning. They're here to grow up. They're making poor choices. Those poor choices have negative feedback for them. People who are greedy are not happy people. No. They're not happy people at all. And they get that negative feedback. They're mostly very miserable people. And they think they'll be happier if they could just get more. Yeah. If they could just get more stuff, they'd be happy. More control, more power, and that would make them happy. But as it turns out, that doesn't make them happy at all. So then they need to try to get more because they're not happy yet. Right. And it doesn't work that way. So these are people with low quality of consciousness struggling with their choices, making poor choices, but unable to grow up very much. Well, that's the way it is here. Almost no one grows up in great leaps and bounds. Growing up is a thing we do just a little bit at a time. And it has to come from the inside out. You don't grow up because somebody lectures you about growing up. You grow up because you see that you need to change who you are. So those people will suffer and they will create a lot of dysfunction in their life. And maybe eventually they'll get the idea that, gee, all of that grabbing and grabbing and grabbing for things really wasn't very useful. And the stuff that was really meaningful in my life, which was the relationships, my family, my kids, my spouse, other people that I could have helped. And you kind of realize that there was much more value in that than there was in grabbing more and more stuff, trying to make more and more money, more and more control, more and more power. So the system is such that when you make poor choices, you end up with a dysfunctional life with little happiness, little satisfaction. And it's like the harder you try, the further, what's that, the closer you get, the more you slide away. That was a song by Simon and Garfunkel. The harder you try, the more you keep sliding away. So it's like that. And they keep trying harder and harder, more power, more control. And they just get further and further away from satisfaction, from feeling good about who they are and what they are, from having good relationships with other people, from love. The more fear you have, the farther away you are from love. And people see that love that sometimes other people have. They see that and they want to know, how do I get that? You see, like there's some way to go out and manipulate the world so that you have that. But you see, none of it comes from the outside. It only comes from the inside. The way you get that is by changing who you are, getting rid of your fear, raising your capacity for love, and then that is possible. And mostly it just happens. And you do find satisfaction. And you do find happiness. But it's by getting rid of your fear and opening up and being positive. So to all of our listeners out there, if you find yourself complaining about life, about other people, about the situation, about the greedy corporations, about the governments, about the fascism, about all sorts of things going on in the world, if you find yourself complaining about all of that and a little angry about it and annoyed with it all, then you're part of the problem. You need to learn to be positive. Because if you're positive, you help other people around you be positive. You become a force pulling the whole thing toward a more positive space. And if you do that, you'll do more to fix that negative situation than you will by getting angry with it. Getting angry with it generally just makes it worse, not better. So don't feel the need to fix other people. Just fix yourself. And that is the really most optimal thing that you can do to help other people. It's just fixing yourself. I hear a noise. Do you hear a noise buzzing?
I don't.
Okay, well then good. If you don't hear it, then neither will all the people out there.
That's good.
It's the construction people in my house that had something going on there, but I'm glad it didn't get picked up by the mic. So that's love. Love is something we give away. It's a capacity that we have as we get rid of our fear. And the first thing is we learn to love things that are easy to love, like dogs and cats. And
just see your
once we get rid of our fear to more and more love capacity, less and less fear, then we're more successful at loving people, because loving people is harder. You see, people challenge you like pets do not.
True.
They challenge your ego. They challenge your, yeah, but I want it this way. And I want it this way because I know this is the best way. And you're not doing it the best way. And if you just listen to me, it would be better. People have that kind of an attitude. They just want to fix things and other people and change things to be the better way. So, that's mostly your fear talking, and you're wanting to control, your need to be in charge, your need to help everybody else do it better, do it in a better way. And all that does is generally create difficulty, because everybody, all those people that you'd like to help do it in a better way, they're all looking at you thinking they'd like to help you do it in a better way. And it's just everybody, you see, has that same attitude. So you see how impossible that is. And as they reach out and say, no, Laurie, don't do it that way. Here's a better way. Laurie goes, I know a better way for you to do it. And what are you doing telling me about how I should do it? And pretty soon, that degenerates into something that's negative. Yeah. So the best thing to do is say, well, people are who they are. They're doing things the way they do them because that's who they are, and learn to live with that. Not say, well, but that's dysfunctional and that isn't as good as it could be. I should help them change that. Just let them be. And if you let them be and care for them, if you love them, you will create a safe space around them in which they now can look at themselves and say, oh, I could do this better, and change themselves. But inasmuch as you try to change them and manipulate them and push them, they'll never get to that safe space where they can change themselves. They just keep digging in, doubling down on what they're already doing. So if you want to help those people change, you do that by being positive with them, by caring for them. Because if you give to them and they just take, and you give and they take, but you give because you want to, because you care about the person, so you just give, and it doesn't matter to you that they take. That's okay. That's them. That's who they are. They're in take mode, and you're in give mode, and you're happy because you're happy to be able to give. Giving's what makes people happy. So if you just do that, eventually that person will think, oh, all I do is take. This other person gives. Gee, I should change that. I need to give back some. You see, they can change themselves. But if you say, all you do is take, you never do anything but take. All I do is give. Poor me. Bad you, poor me, bad you, and you have that kind of a attitude, then they're not going to grow up. They're not going to see that they need to change. They're going to build their wall, make their defenses. They're going to justify why you're wrong and they're right. And the whole relationship will degenerate.
And then they figure out that they're not actually giving without conditions. So
right.
That's not love.
Exactly. Yeah, that's not love. That's trying to get what you want.
Right. If I give you love, then you will give it back to me.
Right.
Right.
But that's not love. That's not love at all.
That's not giving either.
Yeah.
Or giving with conditions.
It's that's not it. And that doesn't make you happy. We think we're happy, right? We fall in love and we're so happy. But that only lasts so long before we have different needs or bigger needs, or gee, I thought that she'd do this or he'd do that, and they're not really doing that. They're not the person I thought, and it's not working out I don't have what I want. And of course, when you're self-centered, I want is very, very important.
Yeah.
The I want is the head of everything else. So, yes, those relationships seem to create happiness for a while, but mostly in the worst, of course, they just break up and people go off different ways. But in the best, people learn to get along. They accept. They don't like it. They're not really in a loving relationship, but they're at least friends, sort of. They've learned those areas that you stay away from. They've learned about those buttons you don't push. So they are careful not to push each other's buttons. They're careful not to tread on each other's egos, and they learn to get along. And most people feel that getting along with somebody is much better than being by yourself. Mm-hmm. So those relationships, that's what we call really good relationships, is where the people have learned to get along, because it's better than being alone. So that's like as good as it gets, for a relationship that's not really based on love, is that you can learn to care enough for each other that you don't create problems. Stay away from the problem areas. But still, you don't feel very satisfied. It's not like what you hope for, but it's what you settle for. Right. And yeah, so that's about as good as it gets. It's just not nearly as good as it gets if it's really love. And when you love somebody, since it's non-conditional, it only takes one. So let's say you have a relationship, you and your significant other, and you have a much higher capacity to love than they do. They're still more self-centered. Well, that's okay, because your love isn't conditional. You can just give to that person. And when they're self-centered, you can just, that's the way they are. And that's okay that they're that way. And you still love them because they have other qualities that are positive that you do like. So just because they have some things, or maybe they're self-centered more than you are, you don't mind that. It isn't really a problem for you. It's just the way that person is. You accept it, you get along with it, you live with it just fine, and it doesn't bother you. Now, if you also are self-centered, then it bothers you. How dare they do that to me? It's unfair, and so on. And then you get yourself in a whip. It's negativity, and the whole thing starts to decay. So it really only takes one person in a relationship who has a higher capacity to love, to give. It doesn't take both. So if you have a partner and that partner seems to be more self-centered, well, let them be that way. Anticipate their self-centeredness. Don't trigger, don't push their buttons. Don't trigger that self-centeredness. And just give to them and love them and care for them and let it be that way. All right, they may always be rude to you, but you stop seeing it as rude and start seeing it as it's just the way they are. And you realize that they do care for you and they do love you right up to the limit of their capacity to love. That's as much as they can do. And if you want to help them grow that capacity, well, you just love them and give them the space and the security to change themselves. And you have to have the idea that if they never change themselves, that's okay too. That's not a problem. Because otherwise, if it's all right, I'll do this and you'll change, well, now that's conditional again. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be. They don't have to change. But you give them the greatest opportunity to change, the highest probability of change, just by loving them and letting them be, however they are. So maybe they're forever rude to you, but you stop seeing it that way. It doesn't bother you or upset you. It's just the way they are. And if somebody else said, hey, why do you take that? They're rude to you. Why don't you, push back on that? And you'd say, oh, no, that's just them. That's, they don't really mean anything by it, and they don't.
Right.
They really don't mean anything by it. It's just the way they are. It's their level of fear, and they're expressing that. It's really not about you.
Never.
It sounds like it. They're being rude to you because, no, it's not really about you at all. It's just them, the way they are, how they express themselves, and it's them. So if you don't take it personally, then you don't see it as rudeness. It's only rudeness when your ego says, oh no, how unfair, how wrong, you see? But if you just see it as neither wrong nor right, it just is the way that person is, and you let them be that way, and you work around it. You work with it, and it just doesn't bother you. So that other person, you'd say, no, it doesn't mean anything. As he or she just, it's just the way they are. But it's not, it doesn't really mean anything. And it doesn't, and it is just the way they are. And when you do that, that other person then has the opportunity to see what they're doing and to see their rudeness. Whereas if you fuss back at them, then they'll never see their rudeness. You see, so by caring for them, you give them the highest opportunity for them to grow up. And that's the most you can do for anybody, is to just care, love, let them be who they are. Don't let it be about you, because if it's, if your ego isn't being skewered, then it doesn't matter how they are so much towards you. It's not a problem. So that's what love is. Love is letting other people be who they are and caring for them just the way they are. And yes, that means all those people that you don't like, that are doing those things that you don't approve of. You need to just let them be, give them space, be nice, be caring, be thoughtful, and that gives them the highest opportunity to grow up. Because all the people around you who see that you're positive and that you smile a lot, and that even though people come up and talk to you in ways that would upset them, and it doesn't seem to upset you, but you still smile and you're still happy. And no, you're not stuffing anger down and hiding it and pretending to be happy. You just are. And those things don't bother you. And that helps other people change. When they see that, they say that you're a model for other people to see and to realize that that's possible. So you help pull everybody else up by being positive, and you help everybody stay negative and have everything stay, low quality if you're not. So the only person you can change is you. But fortunately, the biggest contribution you make is by changing you. So love is a thing we give away. It is the expression. This is the way I define love in my book. Love is the expression of a low entropy consciousness. That's basically what love is. And a low entropy consciousness means one that becomes love. So that's how you deal with these negative things in your life, or negative people in your life.
I mean, look at that face.
Right. Look at that
How
face.
could you not love that?
Oh, and that fur is so nice when you get your hands in it, right?
It's you just want
to very satisfying tactilely to
Oh, it is.
pet that cat. Yeah. But people generally start with animals and things like that.
It's true.
I love my dog. I love my cats. I don't do with people very well. I don't care for people, but I really like my pets. And that's where people start, because a pet is easier to love because it doesn't trigger your ego. Right. You've got this big ego sitting there, but the pet doesn't trigger your ego very often, unless it, pees on your foot or something like that. Then your ego gets really upset. But mostly animals don't trigger our egos, so that makes them easy. But then the people that are close to you do trigger your ego. And the closer they are to you, the easier it is for them to trigger your ego. If they're just acquaintances, they don't trigger your go much, even if they're rude people or whatever. It's easy to just brush them off. But when it's the person really close to you, then that person challenges you and can push your buttons and get your ego roaring very easily, because you have special wants and needs and desires for that person, and they have to be different than just those casual people. We have a lot more we expect of them and want of them, you see. So we need to let all that go and just let them be whoever they are, instead of wanting them to be different, needing them to be different. So here's that person. Now, can I just care for them and be nice? And if they're rude to me, can I just let it pass by? Because I don't see things as rude. I just see things as, that's the way they are. I don't take any of it personally. It's not about me. Things people tell you, it's about them. Even though they're pointing their finger at you, it's all about them. They are expressing themselves. They're expressing their ego and their fear and their needs when they talk to you. They're expressing themselves, and really has very little to do with you. So you can learn just to let that be. That's them. They have ego. They have fear. They're self-centered. That's okay. Just the way they are. But they have some endearing qualities too that I really enjoy. So I enjoy all the parts that I enjoy, and I let all the parts I don't enjoy just flow right by like they're not there. See, that's how you deal. And that's with the significant other, but that's the same way you deal with the people in the corporations or in the government, or, you deal with them as you have to, but deal with them positively. That will help them change better than anything else. Now, that world you'd like to live in, that world where everybody is kind and benevolent and thoughtful, that world will only take place when the average quality of consciousness goes up. And it can only go up one person at a time, and those people only change by changing themselves. You see, so going out and hollering at them and throwing, stones at them or something isn't helpful. That's not what makes things change. Yes, you can make changes with force, but you don't really change as much as you think. Yes, all the peasants revolt and they get rid of the, nasty king and queen, right? But look at that society 30 years later, 40 years later, and all right, it's a different power, scheme going on, but it's just as bad as what you had before, because the quality of the people haven't changed. Right. So yes, it may be some other form, some other way, different king, different queen, or even a totalitarian government or something else. But if the people haven't changed, then the culture and government they create isn't going to change. So we only change those corporations and those politicians and those governments and all of that stuff. We only change that by changing ourselves. Grabbing them by the throat and shaking them might change the form. We can use force. Kill all those people we don't like. All right, they won't be our problem anymore, but something else will grow up in that space that will be our problem just as much as they were. All we're doing is trying to fix something by getting rid of the symptoms. All right, that dictator there, he's the symptom. Mm-hmm. He's not the problem. He's just a symptom of a problem. And we take off his head and we get something else as bad. And even if we get a really, really nice person, that'll only last for a while, because that nice person will very quickly become undermined, will become this and that and the other, and they'll be gone. If the whole system is rotten to its core, and by that I mean has a low quality of consciousness, then that one really great person can only do a very little for a very limited amount of time, and it's gone, and the rottenness, puts itself back. So yes, you can have, times of better things, but in the bigger picture, the only way to get that nice, gentle, caring, cooperative space is if we change who we are. if we change ourselves. Because then when we change, automatically that government changes, those corporations, those corporate attitudes change. Everything changes because they're us. They will change. So that's how you fix it permanently, by fixing yourself. Yeah. Otherwise, we're just symptoms. All right, get rid of that corporation, get rid of that CEO, get rid of those people because they're really abusive. They're abusing all their customers. They're abusing their employees. So we get rid of them, but it doesn't really fix anything in the long term. It only fixes things in a little short term for just a few people for just a while. It all goes back because they reflect us. They reflect the average quality of consciousness in humanity. The only reason that your attention's drawn to them is they happen to be in a position of power. So their nastiness looks huge because they can reach out and be nasty to hundreds of thousands of people at a time, whereas you can only reach out and be nasty to 3 or 4, you see? So you look at them and say, how nasty they are. They're so awful. But that's the biggest difference. They have power and you don't. You see, they're self-centered, you're self-centered. Most everybody's self-centered, but these people have power. So their self-centeredness can just tear up all sorts of people's lives. And we don't like them. Our self-centeredness only tears up our own relationships, our own lives, our own children and spouses and, families and places at work and so on. And that's small. So we hardly notice that. We don't see ourselves as monsters like they are. But there's not that much difference. Not that much difference. It's people that are in positions of power. It's not that they turn into monsters when they get the power. That monster was always there. It was just under the surface because it didn't have the opportunity to exercise that power, control, and force. So that's why it works that way. So you see, the people that we rage at are really a reflection of us. And raging at them, sort of like raging at our own inability to do anything about it, to fix it, because we think the problem is outside of us. We think, if I could just rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic, everything would be just fine. It's not like that. The problem isn't outside of you. The problem's inside of you. By constantly trying to manipulate and change and fix the outside world, most of us are just adding to the anger and to the negativity and to the dysfunction that's out there, unless we do it positively. Do it positively. Sure, you can go demonstrate for peace. You can write letters. You can write books. You can get on YouTube and explain things to people. All that's positive, and by all means do that. I'm not saying just sit back and dig a hole, crawl in it, pull the lid in over you. That's not what I'm saying. You need to be engaged. You need to be connected. You need to speak out. You need to talk about, what changes we have. All that's necessary. Yes. Don't sit down and be quiet and just suck it up and take things as they come. That's not what I'm saying. But you have to do it positively, not negatively. You have to do it positively. You have to show an example. You have to be an example. And you have to always be positive. Anybody can complain about what's wrong, but to show something better, that's helpful. Just complaining about something is not helpful. And when you show something better, you don't show it like, here's what everybody has to do, control, power, force. If everybody was forced to do this, it would be a better place. No, it wouldn't. It would degenerate right back to the same place it is now. People have to make these choices on their own. Yes, we can create laws that prevent people with making poor choices, but that only goes so far. People have to change. Just trying to keep people from from poor behavior and make them behave better doesn't really help them grow up much. They look maybe and act like they're grown up more because They obey all these laws. So they're polite and other things. But if inside they're not grown up very much, then it doesn't work. The relationships are still bad. The CEO is still greedy. You have all this other stuff, even if they're very polite and donate, $100,000 a year to poor people, but they're still greedy. You see, but they're acting nicer. Well, that's good. We like people to act nice, but that's not the point. The point is to be nice. So the only way, if you are nice and you do care about people, well, that's what we've been calling love, right? It's caring about people, being nice, helping, not self-centered, not taking, helping. So you see, that's love. So that's love in a big scale. But it's all the same thing. If you shrink it to the smaller scale, it's about your cat. Well, that's okay, but that's a very simple problem. A very simple relationship with your cat and with your dog, with your parakeet. It's a very, very easy. If it's with your turtle, that's even easier. It's hard for a turtle to challenge your ego.
Well, I don't know.
You
can go
a cat can do it.
Go in that shell, not come out.
A cat can scratch your wallpaper or
can jump and drop things and break things and
right.
chew up your shoes.
They have all sorts of ways to get to your ego, but goldfish and turtles are probably a lot easier, but they're a lot less rewarding too. They don't give back as much. Right. And a significant other is more rewarding than is a pet. You see? So it's just, where is your capacity and what can you do and how much can you handle and how much do you have to give? In other words, how little fear do you have? You're able to step that up. And then maybe if you can, be successful at loving your children, because that's pretty easy too, loving your children. Not as easy as loving your pets, but it's still pretty easy, rather than trying to manipulate your children and make them be the way you want them to be, which is all self-centeredness. If you can just love your children, and that's love your significant other, that's a big challenge. And pretty soon it goes up bigger yet. You love your environment, you love the world, you love humanity. You have a positive attitude about everything. And guess what? You smile a lot, you're happy. Nothing really gets you down. And you think, when people come in, oh, the sky's falling, awful things are happening, terrible things. We're all going to die of diseases. Everything's going to happen. And you think, yeah, well, maybe that's okay. If that happens, then it'll happen and everything will go on and opportunities will still be there to learn. And it's just not that big a deal. Certainly not worth getting upset about. So that's, talking about love. Now we talk about it from your goldfish all the way up to everybody and everything. And it's just about caring is the idea. Truly caring, not just acting like you care. Many of us go through life acting. Okay, I'm going to be a good little housewife and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to make the meals and I'm going to clean the house and I'm going to do these other things. And that's me. I'm successful because I'm doing all this. Well, if inside you're grumbling to yourself about having all this stuff I have to do all the work. Nobody else does the work for me. See, you're acting. You're not being. You have to be it. You have to do those things because you care, not because it's your responsibility, because that's the deal you cut with your significant other. You have to be. So it's not just about going through life pretending you're happy, stuffing down your negativity, smiling all the time, and acting pleasant. Well, everybody appreciates you doing that, but it's not helping us grow, as a people. You really have to be nice. And you really have to, the only reason for anybody to be nice is because you care. That's why you be nice, because you care about people. So the it gets right back to, if you want to lower your entropy and grow up, it's about love. Seeing somebody that needs help and you just go help them because that's who you are and what you do, that's love. You see, that's an expression of love, an expression of caring. If you see somebody that needs help and you say, oh, I could help this person and that would make me be a better person, and everybody would see me helping them, and I'd get some gold stars, and I could tell everybody for the next 3 weeks about how I found these poor children and I helped them find their parents or whatever. Well, that's nice, but that's not helping you grow up in. That's not love. That's your ego. So it can be a little tricky, you know. In the beginning, people say, I don't know what's my ego and what's not my ego. Well, that's all right. Just do the best you can. You don't have to know. This is not an intellectual problem to solve. You don't have to figure anything out. Just be and care.
I love it.
Care about others and love it.
Yeah.
Just do it because that's the way you are. See, so that's how you treat people. That's how you need to approach your significant other, and your dog, and your cat, your children, and the world, and everything. Love.
And love.
So this is Love Month, I guess, or at least it will be soon.
Tomorrow.
This is tomorrow.
Well, I think this has been a really good show. I think we've talked about this stuff before, but I think we put it in a concept that I think a lot of people will appreciate. So I'm happy.
It's been interesting. Yeah. Love is the thing, right?
Right?
That's what we're supposed to be.
There you go. All right. You've been listening to News for the Heart. We've been getting the heart of what matters with Tom Campbell. Consciousness of love, love versus fear, love, caring, kindness, positivity. That's what we're here for. All right. We'll see you next month. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Laurie.